So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about kind of MEP for prefab, similar to what Andrew was talking about. So a little bit about myself. Went to school at Clemson University, got my degree in construction science and management. Went to work straight out of school for Turner Construction, learned a lot. Had a little bit of time in the, with BIM, being a BIM manager, had a little bit of time in the field, just enough to know that I hated it. And I duly respect superintendents in the construction side, but just learned I was better behind a computer. And that's kind of where I've spent, my last 6 years or so. We've done now with BuildingPoint, did 3D modeling as a service. So that's kind of where I've gained a lot of the knowledge that I'll be sharing today, about prefabrication. So I live in Raleigh, wife and 2 kids, and, I just put an Atlas Works logo in there just for coordination. But I guess along the lines of, where kind of my prefab journey and what I've learned, when I first kind of got into the industry, it was like 10 years ago, and it was, seemed intimidating, prefabrication. So my first slide here is don't be intimidated by prefab. Like this was my, this is what I'll, call modular construction, where you have kind of more big scale elements inside of a building. So, don't think that you have to, start here, right? So that'll be kind of a theme throughout the presentation is like, start small and kind of find gradual success as you go, kind of throughout that prefabrication journey. So for those that are on the construction side. So MEP prefabrication, it's, or I guess prefab in general isn't new in the industry, right? You think about, the subcontractors or, trade workers that have been doing things in a shop. You don't see a mill worker pulling out all of his, laminate cabinet, countertops and sides and, manufacturing, kind of a base cabinet. For years before kind of, before the MEP got into prefab, these guys have been doing that in the industry forever. Same thing with steel. There's certain kind of things that you can do in the shop. You don't bring a raw piece of steel, and shape it on a site, right? You've got to kind of bring it, to a shop somewhere. So, just keep that in mind. Like to some extent, there's a little bit of prefab in everything. You don't just take raw, you don't take a raw, tree and bring it to the construction site. So hopefully that encourages, those that are not in it too deeply. You're basically just kind of taking different components and bringing them, on site. So I said here, this is a hot take, I guess, debatable, but I said BIM is a prerequisite to successful prefabrication. You don't have to do BIM. If you are an MEP, contractor like piping and you've got a whole mechanical space to yourself, you don't really have to do BIM, as long as, you understand all the constraints in that room and there's really nobody else in that space to, coordinate with. We've, one of our trade partners when I was doing modeling that we'll, talk about here, they did a lot of kind of spool drawings by hand. And, I was amazed by that. I was just, this guy has, 20, 30 years of experience just drawing by hand. And, we kind of came in with this new age technology, doing things, based on the 3D model and all that. But, the process is kind of just like anything else, independent of the technology itself. So I put the caveat there, or at least going to a high LOD and LOD. I always have a running joke that LOD is not equal to LOD. Development and design are actually very, very different. That's kind of I do a whole presentation about that. But level of development is basically saying this is where I intend to put something, right? And that's exactly what prefabrication lends itself to. The level of detail that you kind of get into that can vary, kind of depending on how much value that you want to extract from that. So, like I said, the definition is just the practice of assembling components of a structure in a factory or other manufacturing site, and transporting complete assemblies or sub-assemblies to the construction site. So I kind of put a few kind of different visuals around this just to kind of show you, like I said, you don't have to do modular. You don't even have to do the two on the right, skidding and racking, kind of what Andrew was talking about earlier. You can just start with spooling. I mean, you can see these sub assemblies aren't huge, but they are, we'll talk about kind of the benefits later on, but they're easy to kind of start from. And like Andrew said earlier, the technology, and we'll kind of get into some of that, the technology really lends itself to enabling a lot of this. And there's a lot more, when you start going to a higher level of detail in your models and your drawings, you can start extracting a lot more value, even beyond kind of the spatial, the spatial computing of it. So skidding, kind of in the middle there is, this is typically, the MEP only, if it's in an MEP room, this just kind of benefits it where you can, just take a lot of stuff, put it on a skid and just drive it in a building. I've seen these things lifted into buildings using heavy duty cranes, and then I'll say racking on the right is kind of multi-trade racking. That's kind of probably the most complex one, because you're actually starting to think about, it's kind of this coordination effort in the shop, right? Whereas spooling can kind of be done, if you're electrical or mechanical or plumbing, in your own shop, and kind of brought in like Legos to the shop or to the site, multi-trade racking, kind of has a little bit more to it, where you've got to actually start thinking about load, because you can see there's, you're adding kind of an additional piece of structural steel,
So that's actually what we had our last round of local meetings on, was Atrium
Nice.
Health and their racks that
Yep.
they did for a hospital project for Atrium Health, as I mentioned. So
Yeah.
we may get that one online and recorded. But can you talk to another project that you've worked with or that you've seen that used, or maybe you'll get to it?
Yeah,
In
there's
terms
one
of
right here. So
awesome.
this was a project we did with some of the team member, or I guess board members at Clancy. Shout out to Zach. He was the BIM coordinator on this one. I was doing modeling and for Warwick Mechanical Group. So this was a project, and they actually sent me a plaque. Hampton Virginia Aquaplex over there, kind of by the coast. So we kind of went through all the coordination. We had this the two images on the left kind of show the timestamps of essentially I just kind of, as it's nice to have, I think all the BIM people out there like can appreciate this too, when you have something like a webcam on the site, it's like, it just kind of gets that intrinsic feeling of like, okay, I did something, a part of this project, and you can kind of start to visually see it. So that's an interesting side note. But, I think one day I was like looking in the morning and then like look back later that day, and I was like, oh man, they put in a lot today. And I started kind of just seeing, okay, like how long did it take them? And like literally, like I put the timestamps there, and, just to show like within 30 minutes, they basically took this kind of whole bathroom pod area, or kind of that main spine there that you see, and I have some screenshots there of the model, and then what the spool drawing looks like. They basically brought that entire thing in and just plopped it in, which I think there was like a delay because of weather, and they were actually, it helped them kind of not to avoid like a schedule delay too, because they were able, they were doing prefab, and it's like, yeah, we're good, so that was a kind of a fun one. But all that to say, like, that's just PVC, like PVC is easy to work with, it's bigger in size, but there's still benefits. A lot of people, probably wouldn't start with PVC as a piping contractor. You'd probably do something more like this, spooling of steel pipe inside of a mechanical room. So this project was same sub, Warwick. GC was the other, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'll get it later. But anyway, so similar process. So, can't remember. I think we are kind of a Trimble house, so we specifically use Siskiyou for most of our projects. So you can see, the kind of the level of detail that we, go to on, on the modeling side, even showing kind of the exact thickness of that weld and leaving a gap and all that, and really collaborating. That's one obviously huge part of the process, is collaborating between the office and the field side, and really saying, hey, what are we doing here? What do you prefer? There's different options, or, hey, that's not going to work. We've got a certain head height. We've got, a certain suction distance we need off a pump. What are you guys, you really got to like delve into the details of the submittals to really make sure that, all the T's are being crossed and the I's are dotted. In the center there, you can kind of see that was like kind of early stages of, going back to my AR presentation, kind of overlaying digital geometry on top of, the real world. We kind of did it there in the prefab shop. And then on the bottom right, you can see he was the BIM coordinator for that project. So I brought him into that mechanical room as we were doing the installation, and kind of showing him, hey, like, this is, this is what kind of has to go left, showing that whole room, but how detailed we had the model, and how, closely we were following the model and all that. So kind of getting a little bit into the benefits, obviously there's one of the biggest benefit is cost, for a trade partner. You just kind of look at kind of hangers, right? I mean, even if you just started, spooling your hangers, I think that's a great starting off point. And then obviously you can, use different things like total stations to like put the hangers in the deck beforehand, and like all these different things that are, becoming commonplace in the market. But just kind of looking at the figures there, I mean, depending on a job size, you're going to start saving, tens of thousands, if not, probably not hundreds of thousands, but probably tens of thousands of dollars on a big enough project. And the added benefits of safer working conditions. So, fewer ladders, less, drilling, less work overhead, so there's a lot of exoskeleton things, which are cool, but it's like, well, what if we just took a lot of that work into the prefab shop, and kind of avoided that exposure as it was. More productive, obviously, you're not kind of in a controlled environment, you see exposure to weather there, the hot heat of, especially here in the Southeast. And I mean, it gets hot in a lot of places of the country, a lot of places it gets cold, all those things. So, it really brings it into a controlled environment, which people are then more productive. And then, certainty to the schedule. Like I said, on that one, we were able to not have any scheduled impacts due to, the fact that a lot of things were already done. You basically just kind of have these weld points in the field, for the steel pipe, and then, for the PVC, those are a little bit easier to go along. And then reduction of waste, on the construction site. I mean, sometimes think like, if you've never been to a construction site and you're on the design side, like, highly encourage just, kind of unannounced, just kind of go walk construction site. You'll be surprised. Things get lost, things get, mangled. But a lot of times, if you have a good enough plan, you can essentially, reduce a lot of these, wasted materials and things on site as well. So, and then obviously improve quality. And then, at the end of the day, you're kind of winning more bids and winning more work and being more profitable. So just like Andrew had, I've got some, a ton of options. I put them in the mural there as well. Just saying, hey, there's tons of options out there. None of them are perfect, like he said as well. Like, we rep Trimble, and I know we're not perfect. Like, I've heard, it really just depends on, what trade you're doing. Some are stronger in, certain trades than others. But all these, kind of, I put plugins because really a lot of them are basing, around kind of, Autodesk authoring suite of AutoCAD, which is translating more now to Revit. There's others out there, kind of on the authoring side, but at least here in the States, a lot of what we see, are just kind of plugins to Revit as an authoring tool. So, and then just a couple of these animations. I think he talked about the tiger stop. This is just kind of an animation of what the tiger stop is. So, you have all this I and BIM, right? Like that used to be a buzzword. Now it's actually now we have new buzzwords like digital twin. But this is kind of the I and BIM, kind of come to life, right? Where you have all this information that's in the model. And you can see that cut end right there, like that's your waste. So it kind of goes through and, all the algorithms can kind of crunch the numbers. You can put like your pipe length in there and it can say like, okay, like cut this one to this one. And then you're like putting, specific pieces of, stickers on there to essentially, show, hey, this is where this part and piece goes. And then you can start, wrapping those in kits and like delivering them to the site, as you show there. So like, this is even, you don't even have to be spooling to kind of do something like this. You can still just take the information from the BIM and kind of do something like that. And then for the electrical folks, it's overlaying. There we go. Just automatic benders of pipe, conduit, different things like that, where you really can take the guesswork out of it and really enable your teams to be set up for success. So that's all I got.
Looks like there's a few questions regarding the kind of relationship that you had with the A&E, architects, MEP, those types of people within the scope.
Yeah, so a lot of the contracting methods, I think, were not design build. A lot of what we did as a third party is more like a design assist. It really it depended more on the relationship, and I think Dan Morin has a whole presentation about this. I think he did it at like a Clemson BIM symposium one time, but it really, don't ignore the contracting method, but as long as you have a good relationship with the teams, that's really more what it's all about. And showing that, you give a crap and like you want to do something with excellence. I think, as long as everybody's really striving for that, then I think that's the goal. And I've never really been a part of a project that has had true co-authoring, from like design to down to the MEP side. Those are usually saved for bigger projects and things like that. So I haven't had that opportunity, but knowing that exists, there's definitely a lot of benefit to working together.
Absolutely. Are you doing any post-install scanning to confirm install? Seems you mentioned digital twins and
yeah. On these, no, I was using, kind of utilizing the AR MR technology more for that. That's actually kind of how I got my start with that stuff, was like I was modeling all this stuff, and occasionally I would go out to a site and I would just bring my iPad or bring my HoloLens and just kind of use that as like, hey, are they like generally putting this stuff in, where it's supposed to go? And like throughout my 6 years, there was a whole gambit. Like some people, like this project, we'd had like, usually we found like the higher LOD that we were going to, modeling in hangars and, all giving points and all this stuff. Usually those were the ones that, I found in the HoloLens, like, oh yeah, they're installing like exactly like I did, like we showed it, and those were the ones where there's like a whole process where, we got their feedback, and that's a huge piece of it. Some of the projects may have been faster, a lot of different factors that kind of go along with that. But as far as, there was one project, I'll say, I won't name companies and things, but yeah, I looked up and I was like, this is nothing like what we drew. Then you're just like, why did we even go through this process?
right.
So, but yeah, we didn't, we haven't really done any scanning. Scanning is getting to that point, when you start talking about integrating robotics, like Spot the Dog and things like that, where you're kind of kind of doing that digital capture on a consistent basis. You know, the struggle that we have now is like, how do you manage all that data? So, and then kind of what software are you kind of using to cram all that in? So there's some solutions out there. Obviously, you know, Spot's not cheap. You don't have to do Spot, you know, but then you're hiring somebody to scan every week or whatever. So
Sure.
they're
But
good.
I feel scanning could probably be its own
Oh
topic
yeah.
in of itself, right? Thank you all so much. All of these presentations were so fantastic.